Welcome to the Next Level Up, a business seminar series designed for Harford County businesses to help them to grow and to prosper. It is brought to you in part by the Harford County Chamber of Commerce. It is brought to you by the Small Business Development Center and, of course, the Harford County Department of Economic Development. Today's topic is about business succession. According to McKinsey, there are close to 6 million businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, that will need to transition between today and 2035. And of course, the pivotal challenge for every business owner is, what are my challenges? What does that look like? What can I do? What can I not do? And how do I best position myself for either some type of exit, some type of succession, some type of transition to ensure that what they've spent years and decades creating will be able to perpetuate beyond the founder. So to find out what those options are and how we best can help and give guidance to our business owners, we are very pleased to have Angela Rose from the chair of the Harford County Chamber of Commerce to give us some great insights. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having. And it looks like I'll be
Yes.
maybe doing a little collaboration.
I'm very excited to be collaborating
and
with
using
you.
some of my prior knowledge to perhaps add a few cents in. But I'll turn it over to you and Angela. So thank you again for doing this, and we're looking forward to your thoughts.
Perfect. Thank you, Raj.
Yeah.
As Raj said, I'm Angela Rose with the Harford County Chamber of Commerce, and we are very excited about the partnership that we have with the county. So our mission as a business organization is to be the premier business advocate in Harford County. And so we do that through helping business owners, helping entrepreneurs, and to be able to work together for these seminars and to provide professional development is really one of the check marks that we can do as a mission of the chamber. As Raj said, today's topic is business continuity and retirement, planning for that. And our seminar objectives for today, as we go through this slide, think about what most resonates with you. Understanding the business continuity planning, exploring succession and transition options, identifying retirement planning considerations, and develop an action plan. So in those, what makes the most sense to you at this stage? Quickly go through the agenda. Our fundamentals of business continuity, risk assessment, succession planning, retirement readiness, a transition strategy, and then we'll have some Q&As. So as we're set up for the presentation today, why planning matters. I think this is a pretty easy question as to why planning matters. I love the old adage of proper planning prevents poor performance and profit problems. I've added that one in. So that is really why planning is so important. And as we have seen just in the past several years, there are so many unexpected things that come up, whether it be a global pandemic or economic downturns. You really have to be planned and prepared for anything that could potentially be a risk or a challenge for your business. Business value depends on that preparation. So the more valuable your business is, the more planned and prepared you are, and the more you are forecasting and ready for any of those challenges or risks that you may face. Employees, customers, and family members rely on that continuity. So whether it be personally or professionally, all of those people that are in your universe really need that continuity, need that planning and preparation, and to know what is happening ahead. And then the early planning increases options. So, let me go ahead and flip. The more, again, I'm repeating myself, but the more you can be planned and prepared in the process and know what you should be looking for and what your next steps are, the better you're going to be. Raj, I'm going to turn it over to you to highlight the important things. And I do want to say, at the end of the day, this is just best practices and advice. If it's not legal advice, so if you have any questions, please speak to a paid professional. This is just best practices.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue, is that as a business owner, and I'm going to, Angela, pick up on something you said, which is actually key, the planning. One of the biggest mistakes that we see business owners routinely making is that one day they wake up and they decide, I'm done. Age, health, some type of outlook in life where they said, I need to transition, and I need to transition it later this year or within the next year or so. And unfortunately, those business owners find out the hard way, it's too late in many, many situations for reasons that I'll mention. So it really requires the earlier you can start the planning process, and we'll talk more about why that's so and what goes into it. But it really is a process that should start years and years and years before the actual exit date. So let's talk about why. Why is that so important, and why do a lot of business owners find themselves behind the 8 ball when they do decide to exit? So it really comes down to a very fundamental point that whoever assumes that business, and we'll talk about, so Angela and I will talk about, what are those likely options. But whoever is the successor of that business, at the end of the day, what they're looking for, as Angela's already said, they're looking for stability. And when we talk about stability, we really are talking about cash flow. What is going to be the future cash flow and the stability of that business to be able to perpetuate for years to come and hopefully beyond? And one of the biggest mistakes that business owners take is that they take for granted that the revenue that they have been generating, up from the day of founding to the day that they want to exit, really is something that will be able to be sustained and perpetuate beyond the founder in most of those situations. But oftentimes what ends up happening, and what business owners realize very quickly, is that a lot of that revenue was based on the relationships of customers and clients to the owner. And once that owner exits, those relationships don't always translate to the next generation of the business life cycle. Many of the key employees that are the ones that are there to sustain and who've been very instrumental in the operation, the management, the vision, the implementation, oftentimes have that same level of, oftentimes they're the same age, they're oftentimes at the same point in life, oftentimes have the relationship with the founder. And when the founder is not there, a lot of them also are making that decision, well, I've had a good run as well, I'm going to call it a day and I'm going to retire. Or, well, I have other opportunities to go to other competitors, or maybe I'll create my own business. And so all of a sudden, what has sustained, what made that business so successful, crumbles in an instant. And that's why we go back to the key phrase of planning, that in order to make sure that the business can sustain, notwithstanding the founder and the key management folks, that's why that planning process has to start years in advance. So things such as, the revenue stream. Is there any intellectual property that has to be memorialized in terms of having patents and trademarks to make sure that we have something that is sustainable? Do we have client contracts? What are the terms of the client contracts? Are those ones that can be terminated at will by a client? Are those ones that are locked in? Is there a membership model? What does that recurring model look like? Do you have data to sustain what clients are going to be able to sustain and do repeat business? And you kind of continue on that. And making sure that the relationships are there with the clients and the revenue source, notwithstanding the owner, the founder. The best thing that an owner can do is to make him or herself obsolete, for that business to operate without that business owner having to be in the fray. And that's where it becomes very, very important for building out a key, having all your processes and procedures, having your key individuals, and that's where you have succession kind of in mid-level management, and making sure you have new blood, new ideas, new people that are able to sustain a lot of those relationships. So that way things can happen regardless of who are in those seats. And that's why oftentimes the founder's trap, as oftentimes that is known, is that the founder is not only the creator of the business relationships, but they're also the dishwater, and they're cleaning and turning off the lights. They're doing every aspect of it. And everything has been kind of held back in a very micromanagement type of way, to a point that once that founder, if they can become ill, they get, they age out, or something just happens to them, or there's, all of a sudden everything falls apart. The business can't sustain itself. So having and making sure that you have a delegation model and being able to train, and again, that is easier said than done. I think every business owner will tell you, you will have, as the proverb says, you'll have to kiss a lot of frogs before you get the right people sometimes in those chairs. And so it will take a tremendous amount of time to ensure that you have the right people and the training and the teaching, and how do you incentivize them also? It's one thing to say that I found the right people, but how do you make sure that they are incentivized to remain and help grow the business? Again, the objective here is to make sure that the owner becomes obsolete. So again, that's where having a lot of creativity, having, there's different types of ownership models which would allow those key employees to feel part of the ownership model. There are ways that they can share in the profits, to make them incentivized, to be able to grow and to get the upside as the business grows. So by some of those basic steps, back to the planning, you're starting to create, again, that, as you can just kind of hear from my voice, it takes several years to get that right. That's why this is going back to something we said at the very outset. You can't do this 6 months out, a year out from the day that you retired. It's not enough time to be able to build that out. So that's why the earlier that you do this and you start this process and start thinking this through and thinking, again, everything from client contracts to your intellectual property, to the processes and procedures, and having the key employees, so that way nothing is beholden to the founder. That positions it well. And my last point I'll make is, although we're not giving legal advice, the point that you've made, it's very important that at the outset that you do have a very good corporate attorney, that you have a very good corporate accountant, folks that can help you as a professional team to be able to start thinking along these times, and things such as the incentive plans for your key employees. That's where a good corporate attorney will help you not only put the right mechanisms in place, but think through how best to incentivize your key employees, so that we get to a point that when we are ready to exit, you've got something that truly is marketable because you've got guaranteed, recurring, sustainable cash flow.
And I think that planning and preparation and talking about needing to make sure that the owner of the business is obsolete is probably the biggest risk that a lot of owners would identify, of working in the business or on the business and not being able to be out of it for it to be successful. So I look at that as one of the risks. Can you talk about some of the other risks that you really, again, need to be prepared for as that succession planning happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to make sure, and I think about, again, from the perspective, again, everything is from the perspective of who's going to be taking over. So they're going to be assessing risk when they're going through the due diligence process. And a lot of the things that, Angela, that are the risks are set forth on here. So from the standpoint, okay, you have these key employees. How do I know that they're not going to just get up the day after I buy this business or acquire this business and they just leave me high and dry? And, or worse yet, they decide to go across the street and become my own competitor. So now I've potentially purchased or acquired a business, and now everyone that I was relying on is not there. So again, back to good planning. That's where you have, looking at the employment contracts of your key employees. Do you have non-competes to making sure that those key employees can't go across the street and compete against me? Do you have the right incentive plans to make sure that they are more incentivized to stay there and to keep and stay with the business? What are not only the incentives, but also thinking about all of the intellectual property. all of the proprietary information that that employee is exposed to. They have access to all of your client lists. They know all your processes and procedures. And the last thing you'd ever want is for them to be able to leave the business and to be able to start poaching the very clients and folks that the business relies on for its revenue. So making sure you have non-solicitation provisions. Those are just one area when it comes to loss of key employees. And making sure that we always have a pipeline of new employees. And making sure that, all of the things of leadership, making sure that everyone feels part of the business. People feel part of the vision. People buy into it. Team building, all of the small intangible things that we take for granted. Those things are very important for the continuation of a business. But then further, are your files, your electronic files, are they organized? Am I going to be able to come in and be able to make sure that we can continue this business without losing a beat? So you put it cybersecurity. All of a sudden, one cyber hit, and that could absolutely destroy a business. You get one of the bad actors that take over my files, and all of a sudden everything is frozen because I've got now a ransom, and I've got some type of crypto before I can release my file. Now I'm dead in the water. What are the backup systems? What kind of cybersecurity protocols are in place? What type of processes and procedures in terms of education of employees not to do that extra click that could bring in a bad actor into my system? And what are the succession plans? Do I have cryptocurrency in case I get an attack? Do I have a backup upon a backup? Have we tested those backups? Has anyone looked at that? Again, looking at the employee manual, all of those issues in terms of what employees can do with their social media, what type of sites that they go to, am I monitoring those type of things? Again, those are all critical issues that businesses need to really look to. What kind of insurance has the business received? Does the business have cybersecurity insurance? Do they have errors and omissions? Do they have EPLI for whether it be some type of HR type of claim? Again, those are all of the type of infrastructure that a good business, that again, if I'm doing due diligence looking to acquire or to assume the future of this business, I'm going to want to see. Because if you don't have it and there's a breach, that's going to become my problem. And all of a sudden, back to how we started, I'm looking to buy cash flow. I'm here to buy the future perpetuation of a business. And all it takes is one gap. And that could destroy the future of that business. So again, that's the type of due diligence that we will have. And then looking at, looking at loss of key, key clients. What are my sources of revenue? Do I have all my revenue in a small number of clients, and all it takes is one loss, and all of a sudden my cash flow will go from here to here? Do I have good diversification? Have I really analyzed my clients? Have I really thought through that perhaps they're aging out? Maybe they're not going to be needing. Maybe there's new competitors. Perhaps what I have to sell, am I keeping up with the times? Am I utilizing technology? What does the marketplace look like? There's an old saying, kind of what got me here and got me here, that might have worked, but what got me here may not get me there, because technology and business is changing at ever fast rate. So how am I keeping up on the times? How am I keeping relevant to my clients? What is my client satisfaction? Those are the key things that will make sure, again, back to how we started, the perpetuation of cash flow and the perpetuation of that business. Those are the key things. And again, like we said about Angela, that takes years. You cannot accomplish that in a matter of a couple months. These are things that have to be done years and years in advance, but you start doing all the things that we've talked about and you start building it out, then by the time I get to that point, then I'm ready. Now I've got a solid business. I've thought this through. So when someone comes in and they start analyzing the books and they start analyzing my infrastructure and all of the gaps where things could go wrong, we have an answer for it. We got a plan for it. We've established it. And then they really can have more confidence and reliance in terms of being able to take the business either to the next step or even to higher levels for even better cash flow. That again would be some of the key risks that I think that we need to identify.
And obviously planning preparation. As a business owner, we've answered these questions, we've planned and we've prepared, and now we're ready. We're ready to start asking, what does that next chapter look like?
Yeah.
And what are the options?
Yeah,
There's several.
There's several. So when it comes to whom? What most people think is that I'm going to go out to the open market and I'm going to find a third-party buyer, somebody that's out there that wants to buy and assume and that will pay me, whether it be a lump sum or some type of installment. So that could be one option, is looking for a third-party sale. The other option is, well, maybe I don't need to sell it, but I have a child or I have a family member and I want to have this, have them assume it and to be able to assume and to acquire this business. And then the questions then become, do I just give it to them? Okay, if I do that, then what about the other children that perhaps that are not acquiring it, when it comes to a potential inheritance? So, so what's the old saying is, what's fair is not equal and what's equal is not fair. Do I have other assets that I can provide them to offset the other family members? Will they value the business in the same way of if they were giving to them versus having to purchase it? Have they actually shown interest in the business? Have they actually been? So back to the planning. If I do have one or more family members, oftentimes a good owner will actually incorporate the family members in the business. Let me see what you can do. Let me see if you really will be able to grasp what this business, the vision, and being able to develop the skill sets. And oftentimes a lot of founders will have children in different roles in the family, or in the company rather, to see who can rise up to the level and who can rise to the top in finding who would be the right fit in the business. So if that's not an option, how about my key management team? Perhaps these are the individuals that have been there with me. They know the business. So perhaps I'll have them either purchase it or maybe I'll some way reward them. So maybe a partial sale, a partial gift. But from the standpoint, do they have also the same questions that are relevant to a family member or relevant to your key folks? They're really good on operations. They're really good on implementation. They're really good with marketing or some aspect of it. But running a business is a whole different animal. And do they have the skill sets? And again, if that's the plan, is to help your key employees, key management, or even all of the, and there's a lot of different legal structures in terms of how that can be accomplished, which is beyond the scope of today's type of presentation. But from the standpoint of, will they have the financing to be able to afford it? And is there going to be enough cash flow to sustain and help them with their debt load? And again, more importantly, are they going to be able to assume what the owner, the founder, has brought to the table and being able to take the business to sustain it? So again, that's where you have very early on in the planning process, making sure those key folks are taught and trained and given a lot of mentoring and a lot of educational opportunities to kind of stretch their skill sets, to be able to think more from an ownership mentality, more from a leadership mentality. That's very different than an operational mentality. And so again, that's another way of accomplishing. And those are, traditionally would be a couple of the key ways that, in terms of to whom we can sell to. And of course, one question would go into valuation, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Is, well, what do I sell it for? Like, what is the price? And that gets, that's a, at the end of the day, the value of any business is what the market is willing to pay for it. All right, so what does that really mean? So there are some hard and fast ways that we utilize to at least give a starting point. Depends on the nature of the business, the sector, type of clientele. But oftentimes we can get sometimes a bare bone by talking to a good accountant that can look at, and there's different formulas where they can look at, for lack of a better word, without getting too much technicality, looking at net cash flow, and then looking at some type of multiple. Sometimes this is a hard and fast way of getting these started. Certainly we could get business valuation. There are certainly experts and companies that will come in and assess, especially if they are very knowledgeable about your certain sector area. They can be expensive, and that's the trade-off. And that's exactly the trade-off. I mean, sometimes when I have a good accountant, I may not have to charge them much because they're very familiar with my financial statements. But again, how solid that number is, it's not really reflective of fair market value. But at least it's a starting point. But on the flip side, getting a valuation expert, they know exactly what to look for, especially the more specialized, especially if you're in technology, defense, healthcare, any kind of tech, fine tech, those are the areas that really, think about whether we can bring private equity, and again, that's where, when we think about a third-party buyer, depending on the sector, there's a lot of what we call people that like to roll up these type of businesses, especially when you see in the tech space, and the multiples are willing to pay to be able to aggregate a number of different businesses. It's been a very robust marketplace over the last probably 6-7 years. So from that standpoint, you could talk to them and do a pitch to private equity. Again, the more specialized and the more attractive your business, it's kind of filling out the market, seeing what kind of offers you solicit, but you can also, as I said, get a valuation. But again, you're going to be paying for that to get a valuation. You'll get a tighter number, but to get a good business valuation, you could be spending very easily $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for that valuation for something that you may or may not want to do. So you need to weigh the two. But again, having good accountants and good attorneys there at your side really can help guide you a lot of ways in that process.
I love it, and I love that you talked about that valuation and having that accountant come in and look at it, because at the end of the day, business owners are very passionate about what they do, and you may be missing some things that need to be included in that valuation as you go through the finances. Talking about retirement, if we look at retirement and planning for that next phase, what are some of the considerations that you have for the retirement aspect?
Yeah, this is the trickiest. For most owners, founders, the business is their biggest asset. This is their baby. This is what they've relied on to make sure that they can go into retirement in a very safe, secure format. And oftentimes one of the founders' trap is that they think the business is worth X, when in actuality it's worth Y, and Y being sometimes less, sometimes significantly less than what they want. At the end of the day, the value is the value. I mean, it's very rare that whether it be a family member, a third party, a private equity, employees are going to overpay and give you the number that you want. And that sometimes is a big source of frustration, but angst for the owner. Because at the end of the day, they have a certain lifestyle that was sustained by the cash flow. Oftentimes, a lot of their expenses are being run through, cars and cell phones. And so all of a sudden, that lifestyle may not be sustained by what they expect to get from the sale of the business. So again, back to the key word of planning, doing it years and years in advance, thinking about what retirement looks like. So it's a personal, in terms of assessing, and again, I would say the third individuals that I would add to the team of advisors is also the financial advisor, the financial planner, who can assess, the individual's what their other cash asset savings are, their lifestyle, their spending, what kind of retirement they hope to have, to really figure out what is doable and what's not. And if we want to get the business to a certain level, to be able to be sold for that number, which would then allow for that type of retirement, then we need to, again, going back to all the stages that we've talked about, then we need to be able to scale that business in such a way and make sure that the revenue and the multiples in that industry will lend itself to the result that you're speaking of. And again, the other aspect of it, and there's other ways of building in, pension plans and other retirement plans that can inure to the benefit of the owner while the business is in operation, again, well in advance of the sale, which also could be of benefit to your key employees. So there's a lot of, which also can be also very, from a tax planning standpoint, can be very advantageous to the business and the business owner. So that's the type of discussion points that really need to be thought through in advance. But I also want to remark, the other thing that we need to worry about is that best laid plans can go like that. Unexpectedly, the owner dies. The owner all of a sudden has a medical emergency. They have some type of physical or cognitive impairment, and all of a sudden, they can't do and follow through with all these plans that we've talked about. Unfortunately, time ran out before anyone expected, just like you would think about your own family. Heaven forbid something happens to the individual that is generating the money, the assets for the family, and think about who's going to pay the college and sustain the family's lifestyle. The same thing is true for a business. And so again, a good team of advisors would make sure, do we have adequate insurance, whether it be life insurance, disability insurance, and making sure that we build in the financial tools that potentially might be needed to be able to sustain the business at a time that the business owner is not there and is not able to perform. And making sure that we have a situation that we can hire outside individuals to be able to do all of the planning that we talked about. Also, one of the biggest important things that I also see in business owners is that they think there's a certain drop dead date that they can leave. And oftentimes, a lot of the future owners of the business are like, wait a minute, I need to keep you around because I need the owner to be there to help still transition relationships with clients. And I need you to be there to be able to sustain the relationship with key employees. And I need you there to kind of help me kind of figure out things that I don't know. And so a lot of times, contingency in someone coming in, whether it be private equity or a third-party buyer of that magnitude, to say that we'll purchase it. We like everything we see. You've done everything right. We like how you structured it. We like where you position it. We like the cash flow. But we want you to stick around for another 3 years. And this deal is contingent on you sticking around for another 3 years. And so the owner oftentimes like, look, I'm ready to go for my next trip. And the buyer's like, not so fast. I need you to be here. It's a material part of this transaction. And so, again, you need to build in that from your timeline. And again, there's not these very clean dates that you can just leave. Now, if you have a family member, maybe key employees that are willing to assume it, maybe you can do that. But even then, this is your baby. And having you there, assuming that the successor wants you and sees value in that, oftentimes ensures your success, ensures their success. And so again, you need to build that into your models when you're thinking about retirement, and not only from a financial, but from a timing standpoint. It becomes very, very important to think that through. Again, back to the key word, planning, and doing it in advance.
Lots of questions to consider, lots of planning and preparation. I feel like those are the buzzwords for the day.
Buzzwords, yes.
I think we should take some questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. What's your biggest continuity concern? going through all of the information that Raj just talked about, is there any one thing that comes to mind, or anything that is, oh wow, I had no idea, I didn't even think about that? You know, these are the things that I would start considering now. Anything else to add that we didn't cover?
Well, let's see if
Yeah.
if our audience has any other topics or anything that they're coming across in their own their own journeys that perhaps would be relevant to the conversation. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
certainly can add a few more points. So,
Raj,
yeah.
can you speak a little bit about, kind of the retirement planning aspect? Is there anything specifically you can say about, like maintaining of benefits or, some options that exiting owners may have, to continue to utilize, business payroll for reasons like that, or, other related?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways. Sometimes, thinking about retirement and what a business owner needs to continue, oftentimes there'll be, guaranteed contracts that even though the individual is no longer the owner, again, they will be kept on. Of course, there'll be things that they'll need to accomplish and achieve. It's not meant to be a freebie. Yeah, it's not, although, some people think it's that way, but, you can build in those type of models. Perhaps they become more of a marketing, more client relations, more as a mentoring role. So, so you could have certain duration of contracts that will allow for, to make it a win-win, that the new individuals or entity that has assumed the business gets value from the owner, and the owner feels value from the standpoint of getting, cash flow.
Sure.
So that way they're not having to eat right into the assets that they receive from the liquidation of the business. So that could be one. But also building in, different retirement plans, early on in the life cycle of the business. So we've had a lot of businesses, again, a lot of it is tax driven, but being able to create, most of us are familiar more with defined contribution plans like your 401ks, 403bs, things of that sort, but a defined benefit plan of having a pension plan, being able to set aside funds that would then be able to provide a traditional pension, sometimes can be built in to the model that not only helps the founder and the original business owner, but can also help key employees. And again, also providing a lot of great income tax benefits. So again, that's a little bit of a different type of planning. So there's a couple different ways you could structure that, and then again, just thinking about just your personal planning. Have you set aside and your 401ks and your IRAs? Have you maximized that type of planning? And just thinking about traditional issues about health care. Perhaps I build in benefits such as like a long-term care benefit that's portable from the business. So that way, one of the biggest risks that most individuals have in retirement is the cost of long-term care. And so if I'm able to have a policy that was purchased in the business that is portable, and I can take that to my personal, then that perhaps is something that either has been paid already by the business, or even if I have to assume it, at least there was some, a very valuable financial asset that I can take, perhaps when I'm retiring, I may not be able to otherwise qualify for. And now all of a sudden I have this huge risk that it's not been addressed, but because I did the prior planning, I've now built in again, a vehicle to cover potential long-term care expenses. So there's innumerable ways, as you can probably tell from this conversation, about how we can structure it. But that's, again, to each his own. And that's going to be the sort of some of my last words on it, is that there is no cookie cutter on any of this. There is no one size that fits all. We've thrown a lot of different general aspects of this conversation as part of this conversation, but to each his own. Everyone's got different part of their journey. Some people have key employees. Some people have to build it out. Some people are solopreneurs. They don't want to build it out. They're just going to run it, and that's it. And they don't want to take the time or the effort or the energy to build out key employees and processes and procedures and to manage and to let go. That's not comfortable for a lot of folks. So again, everyone's going to get to a different place. Everyone's different from a financial, what their goals are in retirement, what their goals are for their business. Some people just, it works for me today, but I know I have to reinvigorate this business and I have to reinvent this business because of technology and especially with AI. And I've had a lot of business owners that have said, I'm done. I don't want to deal with it. That will be someone else's problem. It was a good run, and I'm going to just close the doors, and whatever I made, I made. So again, I think the sooner you can start tackling and having those conversations with your key team of advisors, the better off you will when you do get to that point, so you know exactly what you're doing and not trying to be in a reactive, or worse yet, trying to create something that you can't create in a short period of time.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Anything else that
No,
you want to add on? So,
This
okay.
is fantastic, and you've talked about all of the main points. Start early, plan and prepare, and I'm just so grateful for your time today.
No, thank you this is great. And yeah, we wish you much success as a future business owner, but as I said, we got 6 million businesses out there in the country that we're going to have to tackle this. And so if we can be of help to our local business community, again, this presentation was done in partnership with SBDC, the Harford County Chamber, and the Harford County Department of Economic Development. If you're not sure where to start, if you have more questions, if you have ideas or want to run things by us, that's what we're here for. That's why we're here. We're here to serve the business community. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us and let us help you start on that journey and hopefully make sure that your retirement is successful and as robust as you hope it will be.
The Harford County Department of Economic Development has a great team of people like Roz Shed that are ready to assist. And then selfishly, the Harford County Chamber has an incredible membership of all the professional services that you're going to need for that next phase in your business. So,
And sometimes getting a mentor, someone
Yes.
that's already done it, and that's where the chamber, I think, can really be exceedingly helpful, is that you have members that have gone through this journey, especially in the area that the business owner is in. And so sometimes talking to someone who's already gone through it in their industry, who knows the challenges, sometimes can be the most impactful and most beneficial resource you can possibly have. So take advantage of the resource that you guys have. So I'll commend that to the business community to think about the chamber, about the mentorship opportunities.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope we got some value out of today's presentation.
And a little bit of time.
Thanks so much.